After 14 long years, The Incredibles 2 has finally been released, and in this video, we are going to see if it was worth the 14-year wait. Let the battle commence. The movie casually opens with Mr. Incredible saving a cat from a tree and stopping some robbers. Soon after, he prevents someone from committing suicide and then attempts to stop a bomber called Bon Voyage. But a super fan of his called Buddy,
my name is Incrediboy.
Okay, Incrediboy, unintentionally foils Mr. Incredible's attempt at stopping him, and as a result, Bon Voyage escapes. Buddy is sent—
Incrediboy!
Alright, Incrediboy is sent home, Mr. Incredible gets married to Elastigirl, and then he gets sued. Yeah, you remember the guy who tried to commit suicide earlier? Instead of jumping off another building, he decided to sue Mr. Incredible for ruining his death. And those are his actual words.
Hey, I saved your life!
You didn't save my life, you ruined my death, that's what you did.
Listen.
Soon after, the people that Mr. Incredible saved from the train accident are also suing him for injuries they received. This story apparently made headlines across the entire country and opened the floodgates for other superheroes to get sued for accidental damages to the citizens. The court cases and backlash from the public became so bad and costly that the government decided to ban superheroes from saving the city. 15 years later, all the superheroes are now retired and are living ordinary lives. However, each of them are mysteriously contacted by a private organization which wants to bring them out of retirement to do some work for them. We soon find out, however, that Buddy, or Incrediboy, is the one who runs this private organization, now going by the name Syndrome. And his agenda is to contact the superheroes, prey on the nostalgia of their hero days so he can lure them out of retirement and make them repeatedly face off against his death robots until they ultimately get outpowered and killed. He tries to do the same thing to Mr. Incredible, who manages to outsmart him for a short while. Soon after, Mr. Incredible's family come to rescue him and also get involved in this situation. From here, our heroes try to stop Syndrome and prevent him from pursuing his plan to rid the world of superheroes. And the story for The Incredibles 2 is that after stopping the Underminer, the Incredibles get blamed for all the destruction the Underminer caused during their battle. Soon after, a wealthy businessman called Winston Dever says that with the foundational help of Elastigirl, he can help them come out of retirement and make superheroes legal again. Everything is going well when suddenly, a new villain called the Screenslaver wreaks havoc with his mind-controlling ability and threatens to unleash dangerous ramifications on the city and its citizens. It is from here, our remaining superheroes embark on a journey to save the superheroes and the city from the Screenslaver. Now, something I didn't expect from the story in The Incredibles 2 is that at its core, it is centered around making superheroes legal again. And honestly, I thought it was settled that they were legal by the end of the first movie, but apparently it wasn't. Now, that being said, the fact that the film decided to delve into this didn't bother me in the slightest. Whereas the first movie was about the fall and rise of superheroes, this movie deals with deep themes regarding public perception, which in today's world is a very relevant topic. We as an audience who watch these movies know the full story as to who the bad guy is and who our heroes are, but the mainstream, however, does not. And how are the public informed? Through the media, through news articles and word of mouth. I made a video about this with regards to Battlefield recently, and The Incredibles 2 did an ingenious depiction and commentary on how the media is so deviously manipulative. So I like how Brad Bird actually showcased that, and he did it in such a way that it will give a good message to kids watching this movie, whilst also being in-depth enough to inform adults. These are the kind of messages movies should incorporate, as opposed to—
I want to control the narrative of feminism, okay? I want to show the world that a powerful, strong woman, she can wear anything, be it a bikini or a pantsuit.
All you parents out there, this is what they are trying to teach your kids. Now, despite what many people say, The Incredibles 2 wasn't as dark as the first one. A blatant example of this is the scene in the first movie where Mr. Incredible discovers all the superheroes that Syndrome killed, and the list just keeps going on and on and on, and the music keeps ramping up in tension. This scene alone was far more adult and disturbing in concept than anything in the second movie. Not to mention that in the first 10 minutes we see someone attempt to commit suicide. I mean, wow. I wonder what the meeting was like when Brad Bird told Disney he was going to do that. Not to mention that the public turning on the superheroes for injuries that they received is something I can actually see happening in real life. And it makes a lot more sense than, say, what we got in Civil War with the Accords. But of course, just because the movie is darker doesn't mean the story is better. So with that said, which movie has the superior story? Well, I'm gonna have to easily give that to the first movie, and here's the reason why. In The Incredibles 2, the first part of the story, where the superheroes are illegal, was done very well, but the story with the Screenslaver, although good, was largely predictable. It was still a lot of fun with its presentation style, but from a storytelling perspective, it didn't seem as smart as the storytelling from the first movie, which had great storytelling from beginning to end. So the movie with the superior story is the first Incredibles. Characters is something that Brad Bird has done phenomenally well with these movies. All the characters act like real people, and their personalities and moods fluctuate depending on the situations they face and the journey they go through, and this is showcased the best in Mr. Incredible. From a glorified superhero to his retired and ordinary life at an insurance job to his re-energized and overweight life as a superhero for hire, and finally being able to reprise his life as a superhero with the support of his family. And at the core of all this, he is still a relatable family man, and this continues wonderfully into the sequel. Now, all the characters are given their own arcs with hardships and tribulations, but the trials, experiences and life adjustment that Mr. Incredible goes through in both movies is so detailed and natural in its execution that you end up remembering his journey the most out of these films. And heck, you might even be able to relate to some of them. But that's not to say the rest of the family aren't great characters. Elastigirl also has to adapt from a retired life as a superhero, and unlike Mr. Incredible, she doesn't have the desire to relive the glory days and has ultimately decided to settle down, which is interesting when you take into account that at the beginning of the movie, Mr. Incredible is the one that wanted to settle down and Elastigirl didn't want to settle down at all. Both of them clearly have changed over the years, and it perfectly illustrates that they aren't just two-dimensional Disney cartoon characters. Elastigirl also plays her part extremely well as the mother. The relationship she has with her family is very accurate to how a mother would talk to her husband or children. As a matter of fact, Brad Bird actually took some of his own life experiences from his own marriage relationship and incorporated it into the movie.
I mean, an argument that is in the first Incredibles where Bob and Helen argue about one of their kids' graduation is an argument that my wife and I had, you know?
Yeah.
Guess which part I was.
And we have to talk about the kids in the movie, Violet and Dash. These are two of the most realistic kids I've seen in a movie to date. They are going through their own individual phases for their age, they both ask their parents for things they want but can't get, one gets under the other's skin which results in a fight, but at the same time they are both willing to look out for each other when the situations they run into get more dire. And in the second movie, the kids are still a blast to hang around with, as are the rest of the returning characters, especially Jack Jack. He has gone from a character that was completely in the background to being one that completely stole the show. All of his scenes were hilariously animated and even a little tension-filled at times. He comes across as a ticking time bomb and you feel like he is going to explode any minute. The best scene of the movie to me is when he is unleashing his powers on a raccoon. That scene could have gone on forever and I would never get tired of it. Also, is it just me, or were you surprised to find out that the family didn't know that Jack Jack had powers? I mean, in hindsight, I guess it makes sense, but I was under the assumption for the last 14 years that they knew by the end of the first movie. But in actuality, it turns out they didn't. But that does mean they were able to find out in this movie, and watching them find out was really fun. So Jack Jack definitely got a lot more to do in the second movie, and he is by far one of the most unpredictable parts of the film. And as I said, Violet and Dash were both great in the movies too. However, I did find something strange about them in the second film. For a movie that is continuing right from where the last one left off, the kids seem to rather instantaneously develop a big temper. Now I get why they'd be mad given the circumstances, but it felt a little out of character for them to get angry the way they did. They would get angry in the first movie, but it felt natural for kids their age, and it was in keeping with their personalities. In the second movie, it felt a little odd in Dash's case, and in Violet's case, her change in attitude and behavior really threw me off, and it came to a point that it even kinda creeped me out at times. I don't know if this was intentional, but I can kind of see something mentally unstable about her, and if she goes through a specific set of events, I am certain that she can turn into a villain. She just doesn't seem mentally stable to keep it together. With a little bit of clever manipulation, I feel like she can crumble and become deranged. I mean, I doubt that was Brad Bird's intentions, but if this is his ultimate plan, then that would be a heartbreaking turn to the dark side. At the end of the day, I might be reading into something that isn't there, but if it is, Violet's unstable character can actually be a very smart setup for things to come. Regardless, when she was acting nice, she seemed like her normal self, but anytime she was acting angry or agitated, her character seemed a little off. And side characters like Edna and Frozone make a return, and as you would expect, they are great and memorable as hell. The second movie also tries to expand the roster and introduce more superheroes who are fun to hang around with, but they are nowhere near as memorable as our Fantastic Five. The most interesting thing about them isn't really their characters, it's really their powers, as the movie utilizes them during action sequences in a very creative way. So, of the two movies, which one did a better job with the characters? Well, I would still say the first movie. Imagine if the first Incredibles movie didn't come out and we got this one instead. Would the characters still be as loved and remembered as they are, or would they leave a much smaller impact? The way in which the characters were portrayed in the first movie was so good that you wanted to see more of them when the movie was over, and although I do want to see more of them after watching the second film, I'm not itching to see more like I did with the first film. They went through much more development in the first, and although they went through a lot in the second movie, their journey didn't feel as complete and rich with development as their journey in the first movie did. So I love the characters in both films, but I do prefer their characters and overall story arcs in the first movie. I've been looking so forward to this. It's time to talk about the villains, and we're gonna start off with Syndrome. Syndrome is a villain that I swear has only gotten better over time. He grew up a fanboy of superheroes, however, when he was a kid, his negative encounters with his favourite superhero, Mr. Incredible, burned deep, and that set him on a path where he developed a horrifying hatred towards them. But what's so genius about it is that at heart, he is still a fanboy, and when you take into account how much different representations of fans we have gotten over the years, Syndrome fits even better now than he did back in 2004, where fans' voices weren't as loud or recognised as they are today. And as well as inhabiting all of these characteristics, the movie makes sure to let you know that he is still a super evil sociopath. His really cruel plan to hire and murder all the superheroes, and the fact that he doesn't call off his missile strike despite coming to the realization that Mr. Incredible's kids are in the jet. Not to mention that his agenda and ultimate endgame to permanently silence superheroes is one of the best conceived plans I have ever seen from a supervillain, and he sums it up perfectly in these few seconds.
And when I'm old and I've had my fun, I'll sell my inventions so that everyone can be superheroes. Everyone can be super. And when everyone's super, no one will be.
I mean, I didn't think much of it when I was a kid watching this at 9 years old, but watching it now, this is ingenious writing, and it is so deep, it's practically Christopher Nolan worthy. I can talk forever about how great a villain Syndrome is, and how at the same time you can clearly tell that he is trying to present himself as a super intelligent mastermind, but Brad Bird grounds his villainous cliches and shows us realistically what would most likely happen if they played out in real life.
I'm Syndrome, your nemesis at it! Brilliant.
And now our villain for the second movie is the Screenslaver. I love that name. Now, The Incredibles 2 tries to make the Screenslaver a mysterious figure with a completely unknown identity. And this could have been great, but it wasn't, because I figured out the true identity of the Screenslaver the very second Evelyn showed up. Honestly, if you want to make the identity of the villain a secret, then you must make their identity a genuinely good mystery. But the true identity of the Screenslaver was so predictable it's not even funny. Not to mention, her villainous motivation for wanting to permanently rid the world of superheroes was very generic. It was personal, which was good, but it didn't connect to anything. When you look at Syndrome, who wanted to get rid of superheroes, his plan for doing it was so good, and the explanation of his plan culminates with this fantastic line. I didn't appreciate how smart that line was when I was a kid, but killing off the future superheroes without physically killing all of them off, it is a really clever plan and still is after all these years. The reason Evelyn gives in the second movie could have been better if it scarred her much deeper like Syndrome, but it didn't. It was just a generic reveal and an oversaturated, I blame the superheroes, even though when you get down to it, it wasn't the superheroes' fault. Now if it was, then there would be something smart here, but it just ended up being cliché. I can keep going on as to how much of a terrible villain she is, but that would be redundant as I think we have clearly figured out who the winner is. Syndrome is by far and away the superior villain. It is very hard to compare the action in both of these movies, because not only are they amazing, but they are completely different. As a matter of fact, the style of the action in the second movie is 100% different from the first movie in both style and execution, so much so that you wouldn't even think it was directed by the same person. So let's start with the action in the first movie. It's fast-paced, well choreographed, and makes sure to utilize and take full advantage of our heroes' powers, two of which only have a basic understanding of how their abilities work and have to figure out how to correctly utilize them without getting killed by their opponents in the process. And as well as being super fast-paced, the action can also slow down and tell a joke at the same time. And unlike the Marvel movies, the comedy didn't feel out of place and it got a laugh out of me every single time. And as for the action in the second movie, its sense of style has been updated with both a new direction technique and improved animation, and this results in longer, more frequent, and surprisingly a little more brutal action. Not to mention that the sense of speed in the action scenes is absolutely amazing, and the way Elastigirl uses her stretching abilities to maneuver herself around the city and fight is so creative. Honestly, she was swinging around the city so well that it made Spider-Man look slow in comparison. As for the action with the rest of the heroes, there isn't much. That is until the house invasion, and that's when the movie becomes a full-on superhero ride, and the action is non-stop, some of the most creative I've seen in animation since the first film. We even get to see what it's like when Frozone uses his powers in combat against superpowered people, rather than the one fight he did with the robot in the last movie, which was mainly limited to slowing the robot down and ice skating around the city. And like I said earlier, the scene where Jack faces off against the raccoon is so great and definitely one of the highlights of the movie. You can clearly tell that Brad Bird has learned a lot with regards to filmmaking over the last 14 years, and he has incorporated so many new tricks that really do separate it in a refreshing way from the first film. The only area of complaint I have with the second movie though is the final action scene. The big robot they had to take down at the end of the first movie was such a great climax, as they had to creatively find its weakness and combine all their powers to take it down. The creativity with the second movie's climax, however, as enjoyable as it is, it just doesn't hit you with the same level of accomplishment that the first movie did. It was just an extended fight scene, which was great, but it needed a little something else. It needed to end with a bang, but it just ended with our heroes stopping a ship. Again, it was fun, but it wasn't a fight that matched the ending of the first movie, and the first film kept going. After that amazing fight, we had a final confrontation with Syndrome, which led to one of the most fitting deaths ever to feature in a movie. With all that said, The Incredibles 2 did so much good with its action, and even though it's not as satisfying as the first, the improvements, animation, and camera work really made the action sequences so exhilarating to sit through. But going out with a bang is really important, and when you watch the action scenes on their own, they are better in The Incredibles 2, but when you are watching the entire film, the action feels much more satisfying and accomplished in the first movie. So the movie with the slightly superior action is The Incredibles 2, but when you are watching the entire film, the action feels much more complete and rewarding in the first movie. So as you can tell, I absolutely love both of these movies. The story was better in the first film, but I still really liked what the second movie was going for. The comedy in both films also works very well, and the action scenes are some of the best I have seen in an animated movie. What really separates these movies from most of the superhero genre is its political angle. Both of these films have things to say about superheroes living in society. Marvel made an admirable attempt, but ultimately failed. The now destroyed DC Universe attempted it and didn't really go anywhere with it, and the Dark Knight trilogy tried and successfully accomplished the political and crime elements, as well as discussing and demonstrating the consequences of a superhero living in a normal, politically driven society with a flawed system. It's deep and intellectual. No other superhero movie at this point in time has successfully incorporated politics into a superhero film, and that's what makes it all the more surprising that an animated family film has done it twice. That is amazing, and something that has definitely increased the quality of both movies. It's time for the scores. The Incredibles gets a 9 out of 10, and The Incredibles 2 gets an 8. The biggest problem with The Incredibles 2 was its predictability. In fact, the most unpredictable part of this film was Jack. He had certain powers that I didn't even see coming, and the way the family managed to get them under control with the help of Edna was really fun and creative. It also takes the familiar concept of a dad looking after the kids on his own and implements it without feeling dated or boring. It's not as memorable as the first movie, and I also can't imagine myself watching it as much as the first, but it's still a great sequel. Was it worth a 14-year wait? Almost. Here's hoping we don't have to wait as long to see the third film. Anyway, that's it for another Versus video. Comment below with your thoughts on both of these movies and let me know which of the two you prefer and why. I would be really interested to hear what you think. Also, stay tuned because I am in the process of completely revamping my Patreon page and the perks will really surprise you. As always, don't forget to share this video and give it a thumbs up as it really does help advance the growth of my channel and it pleases YouTube's irritating algorithm. Thank you so much for your ongoing support guys, I really do appreciate it, and I will see all of you next time. Take care.